Mm-hmm. Crackheads dancing in the street. Make it make sense.
Wow, it'll be ridiculous. Now, hold on a second now. Who is this? So, hold on. Where did I have that other story, KP? I sent it to you. I know that.
What, an email?
Yeah. So if I just go to the email and I go out, look, I got some feedback. Folks think, I don't want to talk about that election. So I'm not listening. I mean, we've touched on things, haven't we?
They want to talk about the election.
I mean, and more, I think, you're talking about this one, right? Yeah.
Well, it's a crack of daylight. It ain't been a crack of daylight in a long time. Jackson is the exception, brother. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
We're not on that because
it's on that. Man, want more state workers downtown. Deep. Yeah, so, you know, on your turn.
All right, y'all ready?
You got to get ready, KP. You ain't got to get ready. You know how to do it.
Right.
Welcome back, Jackson, Mississippi, to the third night of our weekly show, Make It Make Sense JXN. I'm your host, Tariq Abdul-Tawwab, alongside my co-host,
Keon Perry,
a.k.a. KP, a.k.a. Young Man. So if you hear me say Young Man, I am talking to KP and not my producer sitting across from me, with whom I'm 6 months apart in age. But welcome back, Jackson. Welcome back, United States, and welcome back to the world, if I may say so. I hope everybody had a fruitful and safe evening. I know a lot of folks were getting out to vote up until the last minute, so I hope folks got home safely, and I hope everybody that intended to vote got out and voted. And I hope those that were on the line went out and voted anyways. As much as we talk about the problems that exist, because it's necessary to make sure the charts the course we chart moving forward does not repeat the same mistakes. We all understand, all of us, that understand the power of the vote, right? And that aren't struggling from underneath circumstances that don't allow them to appreciate that, should be out there doing our due diligence every single moment. And that's what I hope everybody did last night that's in that position. And those that aren't, those that are being restricted either through some type of oppressive voter laws or just who haven't been able to get their head far enough above the waters to even look at the choices. We continue to fight this fight for you and hope that one day we all will be in this boat together. Something I said yesterday, KP, I think it makes a lot more sense to have 2,050,000 than to have 2 millionaires, and folks are coming to take your money. So that kind of applies in that way. But in that breath, KP, how are you today?
Well, same yesterday.
KP said,
optimistic, trying to find a brighter day, brighter light.
Here you are.
Like the intro said.
Yes, that illustrious intro. Absolutely. Now, what were you asked me something before I don't want to walk over.
I was going to say, reiterate what you were saying about the millionaires.
Well, yesterday, remember, we were talking about two facts. One, that there's a social media post that came out discussing the top cities with black millionaires, and Jackson, Mississippi fell on that list, I believe, number 8. It went to Atlanta, but it still fell on the list. And we were talking about the gap. And it was crazy is you're used to talking about a gap between black and white wealth. Well, Jackson has a different comparison. In Jackson, you clearly are talking about a gap between black and black wealth, just by rights of the poverty rate and the struggles here in Jackson. And combine that with the fact that we have a city that has one of the top, the most black millionaires. Those two facts combined to say there's got to be a gap in black and black wealth. And that's what you're experiencing here. Yeah. And I think what Make It Make Sense talks about, KP, yesterday what we were alluding to, I think what Make It Make Sense talks about, which is so important, I hope, is to help folks understand that gap in black on black wealth and power. And that gives us a better answer to perhaps why haven't we succeeded in certain ways in the last 30, 40 years.
Okay. That was the question. I see what you're saying now.
Yeah.
But it was majority white millionaires in this, in this city. They gonna
absolutely. There's an overwhelming, which has always been there. Now, but that separation.
There's a gap there though. It was majority.
Yes, and that separation would be understandable given the racial history of Mississippi. You start a race, 30 laps behind, then it's quite understandable that there's that gap. So while the gap between white and black may not come from a moral standpoint, we still can understand that. Yeah. And I think we can plan moving forward accordingly based on that. However, I think what a gap between black and black shows is that there's a strong problem in connecting the resources from the rich to the poor. And you can go into the myriad of reasons behind that, But that's what we have to assume is happening here in Jackson. You have a strong challenge with the haves and the have-nots within the black community. And the haves' responsibility is connecting it to the have-nots, and the have-nots' responsibility are using it to better themselves.
Voluntary gap.
Yeah, voluntary gap, if not an intentional gap. Yes. And in that gap, the wealth on one side seems to grow, and that hence the list of millionaires and us making that list, while clearly the poverty continues to build, and not just the poverty, but the powerlessness. And I think nothing exemplifies that more than Blossom Apartment, where you found folks that were they in New York City or somewhere where there was some type of tenant protection in place, that would have never happened. It would have never gotten to that point, and it's a shame that it did here.
You had somebody over there, what was the peer review board, and you had somebody over there that really cared.
Well, we did, no, and KP will walk you back into it, but no, you're absolutely correct. What you're walking me back towards, KP, is explaining to the people the hierarchy of how this should have been prevented. I mean, if you have a bunch of robberies in the city, you want to know, well, where was the police force? How was this to be prevented? How did we prevent a Tony, I forget the gentleman's last name, the landlord at Blossom Apartments.
Was it Tony Little?
Tony Little, in Blossom Apartments, which wasn't the biggest of the issues at all. I mean, he seemed to be the scapegoat of the slumlords, I'll be honest. But the Mississippi Housing Corporation are the ones here in Mississippi who are responsible for allotting out and watching over the federal money that goes for affordable housing, millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. And then the peer review board, on which our mayor, John Horn, sat, they are responsible for looking at the expenditure and looking at these groups and making sure they're doing what they said they're doing with the money. Now, instead, what we saw in Jackson come to fruition was a young lady out at Chapel Ridge Apartments getting blasted by the head, I believe it's Spivey, because he says we spent $3.2 million or 2-point-something million at Chapel Ridge. The young lady that lives there says, well, where? Now they say 50 where when they try, that's what she said. She said, where's the, and none of us, I don't think anyone in the community saw that expenditure show itself at Chapel Ridge. $2 million is a lot of money for a complex of that nature, right? It's something you should be able to see without a shadow of a doubt. Exactly. So yeah, at that point, I think was our first inclination, KP, you and I, when we started looking at least, that perhaps the Mississippi Housing Corporation hadn't been properly overseeing what was happening here in Jackson and other parts of Mississippi, and then brought the bigger concern. And folks ever want to know how we got to our concern, then brought the bigger concern was, you remember, well, who was supposed to be watching them? Now, of course, we find the peer review, and then we find that Mayor Horn sat on that peer review. Right. And that's how we start connecting the dots. And obviously, you know our stance. We're going to share with you what's there so you can better understand how we move forward and who has the expertise.
Expertise.
Well, yeah, our Mayor Horn, we know he has the expertise to address these folks with the necessary components of the HUD and federal housing laws because he knows them well. And that's why and everything we say here, guys, everyone we hold accountable is related to facts. We were bothered with the 5-day extension. We thought that there would be some type of penalties pulled up, some type of review of what you didn't satisfy throughout the time, according to the HUD guidelines. And then that review or that pressure would lead to those 100 families not being kicked out on the street. And I don't care who came to help. They were still kicked out on the street. We can then talk about STUPOT and other organizations whose folks stepped forward to try to use their expertise to help those people, the Mississippi Rapid Response Coalition and others, churches, but they still were kicked out on the street. Yep. So that's not a response you would expect. And I'll liken it to this, and then we'll move on, KP, to your news. I'll liken it to having 2 or 3 police officers that live in your neighborhood. Somebody's consistently breaking into cars, and the most they do is put up signs that say, please don't break in. Now, it's not their responsibility, but you're like, for the love of God, I think you know a little more about defending us than putting signs up or telling us to lock the doors. You know how to do surveillance. You understand the processes which take place. So that's our point of that connection, KP, that you're pointing out. And I think just understand, even if we hold our leaders accountable and we get better in those areas, if our citizens understand who is supposed to make sure they're okay when they live in an apartment, we've done our job. All right, you want to slide right into the news, KP? Take us through the most important headlights of the day. And this is also the third leg of our day, KP. We remind to tell them this is also your day as well. So 601-948-5950. We've had a busy week. We brought in interviews, which we're going to continue with. But this is a time for you to call in, share what your thoughts have been on our shows during this week, and add anything we haven't spoken about.
Well, speaking of Mr. Mayor, speaking about him actually caring about certain stuff, the mayor wants more state workers downtown. City's economic impact. Mayor John Horn wants more state workers downtown. The mayor recently spoke to the Senate Study Committee on Jackson, where he encouraged lawmakers to bring more state offices to the area, citing potential economic impact. We have several investors who have put money on the table to acquire the Pinnacle Building, the Deposit Guarantee Building, and the Regis Plaza. They're also looking at One Jackson Place and the Marriott Hotel. He said, so we've got some Class A office space that is in need of tenants.
One is that downtown?
Mm-hmm.
That's right there where Bob Anasi has bought up that 500,000 square
Right
feet.
next to this,
Getting them a new contract.
Building City Housing.
Yeah, the building city, and Bob Anasi owns that building now. Yeah, the regions. The reason that what brought your attention to that one, KP? Because I know that out of all the stories, and we have a long list of stories we pull up for you. But what struck you there?
What struck me with that story? Why do we need more state workers downtown?
Yeah,
that's not. We have enough stuff downtown already. I mean, I understand we got to bring more money in, but where's the money being spent? Why?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And why are we bringing folks instead of trying to utilize that as space for our own citizens to use? And I definitely. It sounded very familiar to me because it's something that the Lieutenant Governor Holzman has said before. But I looked it up, and also Senator Walter from Ridgeland. While less vocal, Governor Reeves has insinuated before that that's something that they would like to do, and other members of the Senate Study Committee on Jackson, who support the general goal of downtown revitalization, have come together as well, such as Senator Solly Norwood, Senator Hillman Frazier, Senator Dean Kirby, Senator Brian Rose, and Senator Andy Berry. So I think that it struck me as, KP, what you're saying, one, is a lot going into downtown, and none of it so far is beneficial to Jackson at this point, outside of bringing in additional tax money, which again, we want to make sure goes towards contracts that pour money into the city, right? So yeah, I was definitely concerned about that just because it's something echoed by Republican leadership. But it seems, this is what I will say, KP, I mean, it does seem to be in trend with what this administration is moving toward, which is a better downtown for the entire state of Mississippi. And I don't think that in itself is a problem at all. And I'll be very honest. And I think the problem lies when you do that in spite of the problems that are facing the masses of your residents. That's when it gets to that. And I say, when? We're watching, we're talking. We always hope folks do the right thing, but when it gets there. But KP, I think you had a little less patience, understandably, for it.
A little less patience for what?
For waiting for it,
to get the last of the crumbs.
Yeah.
Well, we can move on from that story. There's a little headache waiting.
And if you think different, let us know what you think about it. It's a good story.
That's just being a dead horse at this point. I don't even feel like talking.
Absolutely. I mean, but it's good to bring the attention of what it's going to look like, because those downtown buildings bring different things, and that's why you have callers that will talk about it. But those that are familiar with the government understand there are different implications to state buildings coming downtown, from the security of those buildings to how you can move, operate, park, and so forth around those buildings.
I mean, the state owns so many buildings here in Jackson. Why wouldn't they just use one of the buildings that they already own? I don't understand that.
That's what I'm saying. It's so many branches they already have that can reach this point. You know what I'm saying? It's not no big.
Unless you're just trying to kind of pay off a favor or two, it doesn't make sense to me.
You trying to go ahead and spend that money?
Yeah, no. I think it is. I think that's it's as much as the state owns, and this is the problem, as my producer said, he said, as many dilapidated properties as the state owns, right? These things that would lift the city up. I mean, to me, it just seems to be more of an attempt, to pull people into downtown that just are not the citizens of Jackson. It's just clearly put. That's just what it seems to be. And I think that the way Jackson downtown, and KP, and we'll move on to the next one, but the way Jackson downtown is building up to be, you have luxury apartments folks can't afford. You're going to have restaurants coming that folks can't afford to sit and eat at. You're going to have taxes rising that folks can't afford to pay. And I think that if we already have so many signs, that's the beautiful thing. They put it right in front of your face. And I mean, the new stores are charging $12 for a small pack of water, just giving the sign that this is going to be the new Jackson. And what do you think about the term Jackson is rising? I hope we came up with that ourselves almost. I just hope there's nothing wrong with rising. Rising is a great word. My grand rising every morning. So I'm not going to sit there and pretend anyone can take over the word. But
I heard that term before that.
Yeah, you think about the South is rising. That's what you think about. And I listen. Had I not heard about, if it wasn't for the, what's that newspaper? If it wasn't for, if it wasn't for so many other things, I wouldn't even joke about that, and I am joking, people. I'm pretty sure that means that Jackson is going to come up and do something great, right? Which is what I pray for. But yeah, that name rubbed me for a while. I was like, all the names, right? Like Jackson undefeated or United, but anyhow, what's the next one story? I think we have some more stories that aren't quite as,
if everybody hasn't heard about the 11 that was killed and others were injured after a UPS plane crashed near the Louisville airport, investigation is underway. The UPS cargo plane crashed shortly after taking off from the Louisville, Kentucky airport Tuesday, leaving a fiery trail of destruction and a half-mile-long debris field. And at least 11 people have died. Others are injured. And officials say the warning death toll could climb as the investigation continues. What you think about that?
That's just first. Our condolences go out to the family of those people that are dead and injured. That's just that's a lot of loss of life. So it was burning for a while. It interrupted the Zoom I was on. Not interrupted. I had a news page up, and I thought that it was an old news story, and I didn't realize that it was happening as we were speaking. But yeah, obviously they're going to try to figure out what happened. You always pray that folks aren't being overworked, and that's not the result of it. But knowing how hard this, quote, middle class is being worked, especially as the federal government shutdown has happened. It's just adding a lot more strain. And I don't think folks understand how much strain that's adding to the backs of working folks that are trying to make it. And how insulting it is, for our government to play games with the lives of so many people. And how refreshing as well it is to understand that they're playing games with our lives so that we can find alternate routes of ensuring we're okay moving forward, because we just can't rely on people that think it's a game while they eat well. And we try to figure out how to feed each other, or how to get through to tomorrow. So yeah, I just hope there was nothing like that as part of it, but 9 souls, the pattern of those folks that are being worked in that area, I just can tell you very clearly, and we'll leave it there. But the pattern to clear, I'm an ex-union member, a union member, I'm just going to leave it there. They get worked very heavily. And when you talk about it, the deeper south you go, the less protection there is for workers, just clearly put. Yes, our condolences go out to that family, all the families, excuse me.
Are you saying that they have less protection, so it's easier for them to get killed?
Exploited.
Yes, absolutely, I'm saying that. I mean, we have a case right now that we're looking at in not the Delta, but where's the place where the young man died at the plant?
West Point.
West Point?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, West Point, Mississippi, where a young man died at a plant. And our reports from who we spoke to, and Make It Make Sense, we've been to Cleveland, we get on the ground and we ask. Our reports indicate that these unsafe conditions weren't just there, but they were rampant. They were understood, and those leaders there had no intention of fixing it. So I'm very clear. These chicken plants, down to these plants that have some type of nuclear or dangerous waste that they're letting out, the protection for the workers in Mississippi, unfortunately, often the poor workers is dismal. The sad part is you got to get a job first to complain about the job.
Yeah.
So, you got some other issues that precede that. But, once you get the job, now, you've got to watch. And then you wonder why it's hard to get a job. Well, when the person running the jail has been using inmates to run, their own personal business, and you don't know how deep that goes, there are some other answers here in the Deep South as to why jobs are so hard to come by, but so much seems to come out of Mississippi. And that's a whole nother story, KP. Right?
Yo. That is a whole nother story.
Yeah.
We can talk about this opioid settlement. You want?
Yeah, we can jump in. I know there was another typhoon though. You want to jump into that really quickly? I can read it. There was a typhoon in the Philippines.
Typhoon.
Yeah. There's certain weather that you would hope that folks would have. And I always like to look at all around the world.
Typhoon isn't that basically a hurricane, just on the other side of the world?
I thought it was the type of winds that affected.
I think it's
That's what I probably want to know exactly. Well, you can't ask a question without us hitting go. Yeah, so it's a powerful tropical cyclone that forms in the Northwest Pacific Ocean, centralized by strong circle of wind. So it's a cyclone, which is the same phenomenon as a hurricane. So yeah, I guess it's a
just
chaotic. Yeah,
that side of the world.
A hurricane spazzing out, I guess you were saying, hitting the next level. Like the Tasmanian devil of hurricanes. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, that 85 dead, thousands displaced. We're looking at what's happening in Sudan on a regular basis, and where KP and I are involved in updating and dating things that's happening in Palestine all through the world. But these things, you don't want to ever get immune to anything that happens or separate, folks. So when disasters like that happen, the prayers just go out to the family. But that, and I also, I'm not going to lie, that caught when you think about the Pearl River floods, that caught my eye as well, because it made me think about, different storms, same struggle, and how ready are we if that comes. So I won't lie, that disaster made me pray for the families, but it also made me think.
What's those funds called we have to have in case of a disaster?
Flood, the flood prevention funds?
Flood. Did they?
Are you thinking about how when the rezoning happened of the wards, how some families lost some of that flood protection that applies to downtown, is what KP is referencing, which is an excellent reconnection, KP. But yes, so when they rezoned the districts, the wards, with no knowledge, letting two Caucasian folks, a gentleman and a young woman, who we haven't been able to find out who they are yet, down at the Pearl planning complex, guide our city council and tell them where they could or couldn't. So it was set up where they had the rules. They were sitting at a table with the rules, and they were saying, so anytime the city council would get together and say, okay, well, we want to do this, right? So Stokes, I'll take this. Hartley, I'll take this. We'll do this. Then these two folks at the front would sit there and look at their papers and confer with each other while the city council sat quietly, having no involvement in this. I was there. And I did a report from there that we posted. And then they would come back and say to the city council, yes, you can do that, or no, you can't do that. And when the city council would say why, they would say because the math doesn't equal. And then it was, well, you all don't understand this, so we have to do the math for you. So that's how that, the redistricting of our wards happened. You have to say, if you were there, you'd have to say oblivious to our city council, because there were experts there from Pearl that were actually directing them on how, based on their inability to do the mathematics part, which I don't think is an insult to our city council. Why they didn't have that original plan was something we brought up then. But as a result of that, you had families that were covered by flood money that comes into what's downtown now, and now they're not going to be covered. And now instead, all of those funds will be directed to downtown, to the businesses, to the new parking lots, and to the people that clearly at this point. Now think about this, KP, since you connected that, you've got Prado building up Meadowbrook. You got Babanasi about to build up 500,000 square feet of downtown. So who will that flood will apply for? It will apply for the new good tenants, as Babanasi said, that he's going to bring in. So, yeah, I just think that's a very good connection.
No, I'm just daydreaming about this stuff, man. Think about how you hit a real hard point right there. That all that money is flowing into the downtown. For the same thing, I'm saying, like, if something was to happen, we are left alone. It just hit me, my fault.
Yeah, no. And I mean, Councilman Hartley was very bothered at the time, and with it at the Pearl location, saying that it was akin to systemic racism, is what he called it. And I think that you got to be very careful, because at the same time, he and Foote were pushing, we're pushing a plan together. And Foote was fine, and he was left with absolutely no scars. As a matter of fact, he benefited somewhat in his ward. And I think the benefit that Foote saw. You all remember Ward 1 race, right? You all remember those steps? That ward, it was Jasmine Barnes, it was the young lady, and it was Foote. It was 3 people running, and it was seconds between that race. One has got to think, did that rezoning of the wards, especially what happened in Ward 1, did any of that affect? Of course it did. Of course it did. You look at the dynamics of who was taken out of the ward.
And the timing of it was weird.
The timing of it, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right before an election, right before the investigation started with the previous mayor. Yes. It was strange.
It was strange.
And we protested, absolutely. And they wouldn't put it off for anything. It was really strange.
That's right. You remember we went down and we begged the citizens to come out, and citizens came out. And we went to city council and we asked them to push this rezoning back, because we didn't understand what the rezoning was.
They didn't either.
And they didn't either. That was the biggest thing. And that's when folks started blaming everybody else, started pointing the fingers. That's when a young ass guy in church started pointing the fingers. I won't go down that road. That's a whole other story. Yeah. Folks started blaming other people. These are city council members. Well, he's the one that actually introduced it. I don't know why he introduced it. Well, did you vote for it? Well, yeah, I voted for it. Well, hold on a second now. Then you all did it together. But nonetheless, they pushed forward with the vote. I sat there from the beginning to the end of the vote, and that's how you have to be liable for what you say out your mouth. Being there is the best thing that you can do, right? And I sat there and watched each and every, I might have said some things too loud, KP, but each and every time the council decided what they wanted with an area, how they wanted to reshape that. These two folks that sat at the front of the room in Pearl whispered, conferred amongst each other, and then told the council you can or you can't do that. And the reasoning was being because you have to have an equal amount in each one, right? But the mathematics was being done by those two personnel in the room. And then from there, as Dee said, we just saw the effects of that connect. And I think to KP's point, now what you see is downtown Jackson partners and those that benefit from their business, right? And so you got to keep your eyes open on who in your community was fully supportive of downtown Jackson partner, how early and what they're receiving from it, right? Mm-hmm. So now a lot of that flood money, a lot of the extra money is all going to flow into that downtown area. And who's going to receive that? The new good tenants that supporters of the mayor are bringing into the city. So, I just think that's worth saying. We move on, we hold folks accountable, but if our folks don't understand what happened and how it linked to what's happening now, so you have to tell yourself before Angelique, before that rezoning, this could not have happened. The zone you're talking about, the people that lost the flood insurance, none of that would have happened. A lot of that was made possible all the way up to foot winning.
So before the rezoning, we had it covered.
There were folks that are not covered now where flood money would have covered them, A. And B, there's a chance that Foot would not be sitting there. It's 601-948-5950. If we have political analysts, you're talking about hairs that the race was. All three of them were together by hairs.
It was like under 10 votes.
Under 10 votes, yes. I think it was a few hundred people that were removed out of that ward, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. Jackson is a majority Democratic city. So let's just come on now. This is Make Sense Jackson. We're a majority Democratic city, and Foot is a Republican who ran independent to help persuade to vote for his constituents. This is what he said in Northside Sun, right? So what do you think happened to the people that were lost? That perhaps you have a very good chance they were Democratic voters. They were going to vote Democratic. And the folks understand that Foot's a Republican, right, from his own mouth. So, KP, I think that's very good to walk folks back in. And I think we have to continue to do that. So folks continue to understand the why behind the what. Now you have folks that may be shooting back on our videos and taking a look at the transition team when it came in to understand what we know. Our mayor, folks understand that, know the people that are coming in and controlling our city.
Yes, sir. Make a chart about that. See who's covered and who's not covered if something was to happen. So people won't. I know there's a lot of people that don't understand that.
Yeah.
And they may have to beef up their own personal insurance, which is already high anyway. See, the insurance rates in those wards probably spiked too. And nobody's really talking about that.
Absolutely. You have those, and so that's where, and I think when you ask what happens with the vote, you see all of these stresses come in during the voting session, right? And now folks are hoping that these relationships will equal something better for them because they're struggling so much, not necessarily because they expect that from the candidate. And that struggling decision, I always say, and tell somebody what you want to eat as someone's pushing your head underwater. Try it out, right? What do you want to eat? I want size. I want to know what you want to drink. It's going to be very hard as your head keeps bobbing underwater. But I think as folks get, financially go underwater, it's very hard for them to see the forest through the trees. And so, when they see someone who says my relationships will bring something better for you, that, people are jumping out on hope. And that's not happening. And that's the accountability part that hopefully we're here to keep there until it is happening.
It's an abusive relationship up until this point. I haven't seen anything.
It's been very abusive. And I don't know any other type of relationship where in the first 3 months you smack me around and I'm just going to sit there and hope that things get better. I might go ahead and get restrained on it at that point, you need to stay away from me. And you finish doing what you're doing, but I'm watching you, and that's common sense. And like I said, and I have him sitting, my son said to me, and I'll pull it up again, Dad, you're real critical with all of your, with your takes on things sometimes. And we had a conversation in that car about the definition of critical, the different definitions, expressing or involving an analysis of the merits and faults of a work of literature, music, or art, right? So when you talk about analysis, faults, pluses, pros, cons, if your leaders are not, and I don't even consider myself a leader, if your leaders are not, I consider myself a contributor. But if your leaders aren't doing that, then that's the first problem. So critical should be the way everything walks first. A critical analysis, critical thinking. Because when we just think with what's in front of us, then we're stuck with what we're left with. And to Dee's point, we're stuck with an abusive relationship. Oof, makes you sad. I feel like you're in an abusive relationship. But yeah. Okay. That took the energy down a little bit, huh? But bringing it back up, right? That's first. So first for me. Bringing it back up, what would you say? You want to jump in to touch on the opioid? I know that article had us a little up in arms when we heard about the UMUC program shutting down.
opioid settlement money. The Mississippi Opioid Settlement Fund Advisory Council they had a meeting at the Carroll Garden Justice Building.
Yes. Carroll Garden Justice Building.
Yeah, they were deciding on how to spend $421 million in the settlement meant to fight the overdose crisis. About $300 million will be controlled by Attorney General Lynn Witch Counsel over the next 15 years.
So now I'm over here looking for Lynn Witch. What's that? Go ahead.
70% promised to the UMC Institute, 15% retained by the state, all under Republican control process that moves slow to deliver real help. In the connection.
I wonder when Mississippi's gonna get tired of Republicans stealing from them. Because this is ridiculous. They do it out in your face now. They just steal money by the millions, and nobody seems to say or do anything about it. It's disgusting.
Absolutely.
It's disgusting.
Absolutely. And we both just said, and thankfully you understood, hopefully, what $400 million looks like, right? That's a lot of money. And the Mississippi Today ran an article, you all losing that is terrible. Federal budget cuts lead to the shutdown of the UMMC opioid addiction treatment project. That article is November 5th, 2025, guys. I just don't want you to think I'm pulling something that happened in the past, right? So we've got $400 million in opioid settlement money. Why would we be shutting down a program that was as beneficial, it seemed, as that? Whether it reached what it needed to reach is a different question. But I'm just very concerned about that. And we brought you a live stream. If you watch us, those of our kind of core followers, if you remember when we live streamed
It's still up there.
It's still up there, absolutely. The conference, the meeting with Lynn Fitch and team where they were deciding how to spend millions of this money. Well, clearly, in Jackson is not where they intended to spend it. And to the gentleman, and I always give you a shout out, brother. I hope you're still listening. They called in the middle of one day where we were just talking about what's happening with our youth and how to come up with real solutions. And he said, you've got to pay attention not just to the mental illness, but to the chemicals that are going into our young people's bodies on a daily basis. And to not see us be on the front line for receiving money, instead to see programs shut down, that was disappointing to me. Very disappointing. And to my producer's point, I mean, at a certain point, people have to get bothered with it here. And if you ever want to get a good idea of what stealing money looks like, go pull up all of the federal money that flows into. I mean, $5.1 billion flows into the Delta region that's up for, the vote is coming up for, that Benny Thompson is over, right? So you think about the entire Mississippi, you've got a lot of money that flows through under federal banners. And you got to ask yourself, we make up almost 50% of the population, 40% strong. And the majority of our communities are in disrepair. We're struggling. Hospitals shut down. You got to drive 70 miles just to get some type of care in the majority of our communities. Folks love to hide behind Jackson on the other side. They love to talk about Jackson because they don't have to talk about other places. They don't have to talk about that forever chemical in other places in Mississippi's water. We can keep talking about what's happening in Jackson and whether our bill's going to go up. Well, the state is happy to continue to talk about that because then we don't have to talk about what's happening in Utica with Reestown water. We don't have to talk about what's happening throughout this state. We can focus on the best water in Mississippi, which is still horrible. Yeah, it's a bad place to start from.
Best water.
Yeah, that's what folks want, of the best of the worst. Let's focus on the best of the worst, right? So we're doing a lot of bad things here in this state, but look what, and the sad part to our producer's point is the greed in these regional boards being created to get this close to $1 billion is coming in. It's that you don't care about it until we got some money, and then let me get that.
Mm-hmm.
Let me get that.
It's funny how they don't want Jackson's water anymore.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah. I haven't seen another legislative request come to take over Jackson's water now.
They don't want it anymore.
Simultaneously, the Ted Hennepin and the third-party leaders asking for more funds as the funds are going through. Now they don't want it. And I mean, it could be other reasons, but it's very ironic to your point that doesn't have such an appeal anymore.
They came and took the money and said, I don't want to be here no more.
Ted says he doesn't have any money.
Yeah, there's nothing else there. And now the requests have stopped to take it over. It's just done so clearly. And at a certain point, this is what I love about having an audience that goes further. I heard folks talking about the audience, making up audiences. We got folks on the radio.